أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع ذنوبنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبو القاسم محمد والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي أما بعد فقد قال الله في كتابه الكريم وهو أصدق القائلين وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور صلوات على محمد وآل Muhammad. The verse which I've just recited loosely translates as blessings or glory be to the one in whose hands is all proprietary, the one in whose hands is the kingdom. الذي خلق الموت والحياة, the one who created death and created life. ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا, to test you or to trial you, to engage you, to see which of you is the best in deeds, and surely he is mighty and forgiving. We see in here some of that beautiful purpose which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is directing us towards and which we touched upon yesterday, as our very existence being an opportunity to move through these trials, through these tests, towards the pinnacles which we are all capable of, moving towards being the best that we can be and to fulfill that beautiful mantle of humanity. But within the verse, it also talks about death, something which we haven't really had the opportunity to just discuss thus far. And it talks about death as being something very, very real. الذي خلق الموت والحياة, the one who created death and life. With such emphasis, straight away we see this notion that the doctrinal basis is suggesting that death is something very, very real and substantive. It is not the end. It comes before life in this sequence of introduction of the very purpose, or at least one angle of the purpose of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation. And so it's to the notion of death and the doctrine of death and the hereafter that I was hoping to just introduce or focus on today. And in line with the theme of the talks which have preceded, what we hope to do is to emphasize how these inherited doctrines, if they are really taken on, through our own critical introspection, critical engagement with our surroundings and our inherited heritage, can be an absolute pivotal means for us to move forward in our aspirations to fulfill our human potential. And we see an example before we get into, like yesterday, some discussion of Imami theology. We see a beautiful example of how this doctrine, when it becomes belief, can be so pivotal in human destiny when we look to the plains of Karbala. Look at the one known as Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi. We've all heard the story many, many times, that this was the individual who was tasked with stopping Imam Husayn on his way to Kufa and redirecting him or, preventing him from reaching those people who had called him. And on the eve of Ashura, or on the morning of Ashura, this bravest of the brave from amongst his tribe was seen pacing backwards and forwards, according to Abu Miknaf. I think that's the maqtal that you guys have been reciting from. He's seen as being pacing backwards and forwards, perplexed, shaken, pale of face. Okay, he sends one person who was by his side away, who was watering his horse. He wanted to be alone. Another man sees him from his own tribe and says to him, if I didn't know you, I would think that you were in fear. But this is a giant of a warrior and a commander and a leader. And the reports in this Maqtal of Abu Makhnaf is very, very insightful here, and hopefully emphasizing the point that we've been trying to make. How if the doctrine becomes a belief, it really can shape our action in such a decisive manner. So when he was approached by this man from his own tribe, asking him, what's bothering you? It's reported that he said, Wallahi akhiru nafsi bayna al-jannah wan-nar. Says, really, by Allah, at this moment, I'm giving my soul a choice between heaven and hell. Look, his doctrine of ma'ad, that fifth thing, on that list of usul ad-din, it wasn't just a list he'd memorized. Okay, he's there at this pivotal moment in his life, okay, and it's bearing on his moral conscience. He says, Wallahi akhiru nafsi bayn al-jannah wan-nar. He says, by Allah, at this moment, my soul is a position of choosing between heaven and hell. And he says, Wala akhtaru ala jannah shay'a. And I'm not going to choose heaven over anything. And with that, it's reported that he moved towards the camp of Husayn ibn Ali. Look, this doctrine was a conviction. And even then, at the point of conviction, clearly you can see this man believed there is a heaven and hell. It still wasn't enough. He now had to make sure that he didn't do kufr of that belief. This was his moment. He's standing there saying, right now, I have before me heaven and hell. Do I ignore that? Okay? Or do I embrace it? Do I cover this belief? Or do I act in accordance with it? Okay, that doctrine became belief, resulted in action, was not only his salvation, but was salvation for so many who have come after him. Okay, as he became this symbol of freedom and responsibility. So we want to look today at this, how this notion of death, the doctrine of the afterlife, okay, can be seen as something very, very real, very, very relevant, and how we might be able to move it from doctrine to belief and into action, to take it away from the religion which is on the tongues. The tradition which has framed these three talks was that of Abu Abdullah al-Hussain saying, An-nas abid ad-dunya, that humankind is the servant of the world. وَالدِّينَ لَائِكٌ عَلَىٰ أَلْسِنَتِهِمْ, and their religion is simply hanging on their tongues. And further on it says, كَلَّا الدَّيَّانُونَ, few are the ones who are deeply committed. So can our understanding of the hereafter help move us to become those deeply committed, godly souls? Now the notion of death, as we've seen in this verse of the Quran which we started with, all right, is absolutely intended to be something very, very real and relevant. Very, very purposeful. Okay, not something which is the end. This world is only simply a phase, as that is a phase towards the purpose which we are directed to. In a famous tradition attributed to Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wassalamu alayhi, خَلَقْتُمْ لِلْبَقَى مَا خَلَقْتُمْ لِلْفَنَى. You've been created for perpetuity. You haven't been created simply to perish. So undoubtedly the Quran again and again emphasizes that this world is simply passing. The next world is the real world. This is but an opportunity for us, a means for us, a chance for us to fulfill that potential which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed in each and every one. And the notion of an afterlife, as it is constructed by the classical Shia theologians, again building on this discourse of rational theology which we started with yesterday, is one which stems from that conception of a just God and a wise God and a purposeful God, that there must be a hereafter if this world is not created without purpose. If this world is created with purpose, there must be a hereafter, as Imam Ali was pointing to. He says the theologians say that there must be a hereafter if it is a just God, because he's given us burdens in this world. He brought us here and he gave us taklif. Yesterday I was asked, what's this all about? He's brought us here and then he gives me taklif. Then he gives me responsibility. And surely all of that benefit isn't necessarily acquired in this world. We said the unwarranted suffering demands that there be a hereafter. What's more, the just God must fulfill his promise, must fulfill his threats. So the notion of a hereafter is something which is, to be honest with you, almost undoubted within the Muslim. It is undoubted within the Muslim tradition. Something taken very, very for granted, almost axiomatically accepted. But how do we accept and understand the specific notions of this doctrine? We may say that, okay, it seems reasonable that this is only a phase. And we have this inclination against futility. We have this inclination, towards perpetuity. All right, but this concept of death, what's the particularity of it that Islam wants to bring? Now, this is obviously, and this is not usually a subject matter which people enjoy discussing. But we have anxieties about death, and it's quite natural. In our current contemporary culture, it's all about the here and now. It's all about the quick fix. It's all about legacy, what I leave behind, rather than the trajectory in which I am driving. And we understand in this culture, when we're so concerned about what I leave and what I am now, that this death and recognition and emphasis that everything will perish causes anxiety. It's quite understandable. And so it's a major role of such religious traditions to explain the concept, to use it as a positive discourse. Just like all of these other doctrines, it's instrumental. The whole notion is intended as a means to impel us towards those heights of ahsan amal, of the best of actions. But this anxiety over discussion of death is not just simply because of our here and now culture. It also, if we're very, very honest, comes from some of our religious culture. With the emphasis we place on the pictures of a traumatic death, of the torment in the grave, of the hellfire. This stuff, this is, when we hear descriptions sometimes from, regarding life after death, we would think this should be 18 plus rated material. Yeah? And unsurprisingly, it causes anxiety. Unsurprisingly, it causes anxiety. But I think if we look again at the Quran, its descriptions, we look at the traditions of the Ahl al-Bayt, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim ajma'een, we see that the picture is far from one of being trauma and torture. No, this is a perfectly balanced picture. Of yes, descriptions of punishment, but at the same time reward. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives wa'ad and wa'id, promises and threats. Rasulullah was Bashir and Nadhir. He was the bringer of good news as well as the warner, This balance of trying to create fear and hope, intending to be a means to give us that ultimate basis of moving forward, okay, with those developmental aspirations. It just so happens, and I discussed this with one of the ladies, that we miss all the good news in the Quran. Because we see rivers and gardens. It doesn't strike us when we read these descriptions in the Quran. Because alhamdulillah, we have plenty of rain here. Okay, alhamdulillah, we have plenty of grass, maybe not in London, but at least we're, in Birmingham and Leicester, alhamdulillah, there's plenty of grass and green grass. So we read the Quran and all we see is the negativity. And maybe our religious culture, those speakers are promoting a culture of fear. But I firmly believe if we look at the Quran justly, we'll see a beautiful balance between fear, yes, and hope. Rasulullah was Bashir and Nadhir. And in fact, if the balance is tipped in any direction, we have no doubt that is the religion of Ar-Rahman and Rahim. Look, this unlimited God, okay, biduni naqs, without any qualification, without any qeed, okay, is the one who says explicitly that my anger is preceded by my mercy. The one who is absolutely unlimited himself says, kataba ala nafsihi ar-rahma. Okay? That I have written against my own self mercy. So if you disagree with me and say there isn't this balance and it tips in one way, there is no doubt it is towards that merciful aspect of the Lord and the objective of humankind. So death isn't intended to be something grim. The hereafter isn't intended to be source of torture and only bad news. Rasulullah is reported to have said, Al-Maut tuhfat al-mu'min, Rihana, okay, lil-mu'min. This is a gift for the believer. Okay, this is a fragrance for the believer. Okay, there's so many beautiful traditions giving this positive vision of what is to come for those who are prepared to move themselves now, who are proposed to direct themselves towards that godly nature, which we are all capable of. So it's not supposed to be negative. It's supposed to drive us. We can accept the basis of a doctrine itself, but how about the particulars? We still need to come to some understanding of them. How can we start to justify them? As we said, we need to move from inherited doctrine to belief. And this requires personal, critical engagement. The Usul al-Din, according to the classical Imami scholars, okay, must be known independently, bid-dalil and la bid-taqlid. Okay, through your own justifications, through your own understanding, and not through imitation. This is the classical Imami position. At the very least, we can try to explore. Okay, with the hope that this engagement may allow us to have a doctrine that makes us like Khur ibn Yazid. Okay, so we still have this question of how can we justify the particulars? How have the theologians dealt with these questions? Now, when it comes to the particularities of the details of the hereafter, we still get concerned because we hear of the barzakh, and we hear of the mizan, and we hear of the sirat, we hear of this intermediary phase, we hear of the path, we hear of the scales. Okay, there is still reports of questioning in the grave. So what's this all about? How can we justify these things? How can we explain these things? How can we come to believe these things? So again, just introducing one lens, which is the lens of one of these inherited lenses of the rational Imami theologians. Now, the way they deal with these issues is very, very interesting and actually can give us an exceptionally useful framework to understanding religious traditions in a world and a time when continuously we're being accused of doing things which are nonsensical and irrational. Okay, so before we go here, let me just introduce to you a distinction which is very, very important for these rational theologians. So they say that, look, something we can call something rational or sensible, loosening the language slightly, if we have justification for it. Okay, if we can justify something, if we have evidence for something, we can call this rational. In their framework, they're talking about logical, certain evidence. Okay, so we say if we have reason behind something, we can say this is rational. And if we have reasons against something, you could call it irrational or nonsensical. Okay, so either we can justify something, we can explain it rationally, it's rational. Or we can have rational reasons against it, it's irrational and impossible. But there's a space in between. If we don't have a rational reason against something, it doesn't make it irrational. It's what we might call non-rational. Okay, now let me give an example to try and just bring this concept a little closer to home. So if I say that this year, Arsenal Football Club is going to win the Champions League, I don't know what people's response would be. It's North London. Yeah, some people are sniggering and say impossible. Okay, doubt it, impossible. Nobody yet said yes, it's going to happen. Some people are looking at me thinking I'm very strange. I obviously don't know football. Okay, but it's possible. Okay, if I say to you, Watford is going to win the Champions League this year, is it possible or impossible? It's impossible because they're not in that particular competition. Okay, there's a rational reason why it is impossible that Watford Football Club can win the Champions League. Okay, Arsenal Football Club, however unlikely, okay, however crazy it might sound, okay, however impossible the Spurs fan believes it is, okay, in reality it's rationally possible. And if a true prophet came, who you were convinced of, okay, as being a truthful prophet from God and told you that this year Arsenal, okay, A'udhu Billah, okay, is going to win the Champions League, okay, it's not an irrational belief. We may say, okay, this is a non-rational belief. I don't have a rational basis for it, but it's not irrational. The truth of the matter is Leicester is going to win this year, the Champions League. Okay, so we have three concepts here. Okay, rational. We have a rational basis for a belief in something. Okay? Something is deemed irrational and impossible because there's a rational, sure, okay, reason to say, consider it impossible. Watford winning the Champions League this year. Okay, then there's a space in between. We don't have a rational basis for it, nor do we have clear-cut rational arguments against it. Okay, in this non-rational area, okay, we can absolutely build a belief on the true words of the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt. Okay, and the information of Scripture, assuming we've been convinced by Scripture. Now, when it comes to the details of the afterlife, the barzakh, the mizan, the sirat, the occurrences in the afterlife, okay, these are all what we may consider non-rational issues. So long as we don't have a rational justification to show they're impossible, we can accept, okay, the teachings based on the surface value of the texts, simply because the Prophet said so. I may not understand how, I may not understand what it means, but I can have a justifiable belief within a rational framework that these things are going to happen. Now, accordingly, when we look at the works of Muslim theology, the theologians, when they come to the question of ma'ad and the hereafter, their main focus becomes on defending the possibility of ma'ad. All right? And all Muslims agree that there is an afterlife. What was disputed was the nature of the afterlife. Is it a bodily resurrection, or is it simply the continuance of the soul? So the theologians, what their concern was to defend, okay, bodily resurrection, that a body will be brought back in the hereafter. And how were they going to do it? Simply by saying it's not rationally impossible that there can be another body in the hereafter. Because there's overwhelming amount of texts in the Quran and in the Hadith which suggest there will be bodies, okay, which our souls will be in the hereafter. Okay? So to give you an example and just a taste, okay, of the type of discussion going on, which may be a lens for us to move from doctrine to belief. We see there was a typical challenge which the theologians were faced with by the philosophers, okay, which is called shubhat al-aqil wal-ma'kul. Right? The doubt about this, a little bit gruesome. Okay, so I'll warn you, maybe not 18 plus, but it is, so just bear with me. Shubhat al-aqil wal-ma'kul. It says the doubt about the eater and the eaten. Okay, so the philosophers were asking the theologians, they're saying that, look, if you're saying that the body is going to be resurrected in the hereafter, whose body is going to be resurrected? Because I am composed of many, many things. We live in we're more familiar with the carbon cycle now than those theologians and philosophers were then. But they had a sense that bodies decompose. They become part of the environment. Okay, they're a source for food. Okay, that food becomes a source for our food. Okay, and ultimately there's a mingling over time, okay, of the constituent elements of the eater and the eaten. Okay, so without becoming more gruesome than that, all right? We are literally, physically, we are the product of our forefathers. Okay, not just in the sense that we normally think. Okay, humankind and human history is so intertwined, it's remarkable. Okay, so intertwined, it's remarkable. Okay, but that's another discussion. So the question was, okay, if the body is going to be resurrected, who's going to be resurrected? Either I can be resurrected, or that person 15 generations before, from whom some molecular particles have been kind of subsumed somehow into my body. So how is it possible that one thing can't occur in two places, and therefore bodily resurrection is impossible? Okay? This was the philosophers. What did the theologians respond? They say that no, okay, it's still possible. It's still possible to have a body like this body. Okay? And there only has to be some continuity in our essential organs. And the identity of the individual is maintained by the soul returning to that body. And accordingly, some have interpreted the verse of the Quran, which I'm sure many of you know, أَوَلَيْسَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ بِقَادِرٍ عَلَىٰ أَن يَخْلُقَ مِثْلَهُمْ. Okay? Someone said the verse of Surah Yasin, which says, is not the creator of the heavens and the earth capable of creating the like of you, not you? Okay, so some theologians have said that God is going to create another body, not this body. And when the soul enters it, it will become me. Now, those traditional theologians said all it needed to maintain identity was some continuance of essential organs. Today, we can go further, and we can understand that simply through the DNA, it would be possible to have another body like mine today. Simply the DNA, I don't need maintenance of essential organs. I just need a matching DNA. Now, if we can fathom it, surely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is capable of actioning it. Okay, so when it comes to the doctrines of Ma'ad, this was just an example. Okay, the tone is to ensure that the belief is not impossible. If it's not impossible rationally, we can accept the texts. We're at the mercy of the texts. Okay? Yeah, the Quran, the Sunnah, the Hadith. We may not understand exactly what's going on, how it's going to happen, what's the nature of that afterlife going to be. But it can still drive me at the level of belief, like it drove Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi. Nevertheless, some philosophers have given us insights which can help us appreciate what it might actually mean to have pleasure and pain in the afterlife. Because the grave, this period in between the barzakh, is described, okay, as riyaz min riyaz al-jannah, or hufr min hufratin min an-nar, hufratin min hufr an-nar, that this is a garden from amongst the gardens of paradise. Okay, the grave, the intermediary stage. Okay, or a pit from amongst the pits of hell. So how can we appreciate this? How can this, help us as an instrumental doctrine to move us now? Some of the philosophers, I'm thinking of Ibn Sina, gives a beautiful insight. He says that, look, there's two types of pleasure and pain. Okay, pleasure and pain are either intellectual and spiritual, okay, or material and sensual. He says, if during our life we accustom our soul, to the quick pleasure, the material pleasure, the sensual pleasure. He gives the examples of wealth, women, okay, and property. So if we accustom ourselves to these types of physical pleasures, we accustom our soul, this is what delights our soul, these base pleasures. Once the body has gone, the means of experiencing the sensual pleasure is no longer there. But the craving persists. This craving becomes the most burning experience that a soul could feel. If we accustom ourselves now to these lowly, basely pleasures, which are experienced through the senses, once the senses have gone, we just feel the pain of that desire. Whereas if, during this world, we accustom our soul to the intellectual pleasures, the spiritual pleasures, once the body has gone, they are only amplified because there's no obstacle of this material between that soul and its aspiration. And we would experience a pleasure beyond all imagination. So we can see what we do here and now can have a direct impact on what is to come. And that doctrine of what is to come ought to have a direct impact on what we do here and now. Look, philosophy, theology aside, okay, people have counted these things, and they say it looks like 1/5 of the Quran. 1/5 of this book is dedicated to themes relating to Ma'ad. It's phenomenal. This shouts out accountability. This is about the here and now. We don't know how, we don't know when, we don't know what. But it calls us to look at ourselves now. It's reported that Rasulullah sallallahu wasallamu alayhi, had said to his companions, that Yawm al-Qiyamah is closer to you than the proximity of these two fingers. He lifted his hands with two fingers pressed together. So Yawm al-Qiyamah is closer than the proximity of these two fingers. We could say 1400 years have passed. The world is still existing. No, it's completely misunderstood the words of Rasulullah. He was saying, for me and for you, for those people who were speaking to then, your accountability is here and now. Look, the remembrance of death is supposed to be positive. It's supposed to be a driving force. It's supposed to be liberating. Hur was free. Hur was free. Okay, it liberated him. Okay, to choose to reach his potential, to move in the direction of a godly soul. The remembrance of death isn't supposed to be morbid. It isn't supposed to be X-rated. It's supposed to take us forward. And to conclude, I'll mention something which the ulama of akhlaq and irfan give us about the potential impact the remembrance of death can have on each and every one of us. They say that death impacts people in different ways. The remembrance of death, the thought of death, impacts people in different ways. And as I narrate this, maybe we can ask ourselves, which of these groups do we fall in? How is this doctrine or belief impacting us? The first group of people, on the remembrance of death, they're scared of death. They don't like the talk of death. And what does death do to them? What does talk of death do to maybe us or me? It impels me to come closer to the world. I'm fearful. It's that syndrome of 10 things to do before I die. So yes, death is coming. I need to go to Las Vegas. I need to go to Amsterdam. I haven't seen this. I haven't done that. These are normal human sentiments. Okay, the mention of death, okay, it scares us because there's other things we want to do in this world. Okay, there's things we haven't completed. And the remembrance of death for these people simply pushes them closer to the lowly, to the dunya. Second group of people are also scared of death. They're fearful of death. But these people are from the devotees of God. They're scared of death because they feel they haven't prepared themselves enough, okay, to meet with their Lord. This is a beautiful state to be in. But beyond that, there is another state where the remembrance of death delights the one who it occurs to. It delights the one who it occurs to because they long to meet with their Lord. They see it as a chance to greet a long-lost companion. Maybe this was the state of the likes of Qasim ibn Hassan, who could say, death is to me sweeter than honey. Beyond that, there is yet another state described by the Urafa and scholars of Akhlaq. And that is for the one where the mention of death moves them not, for they are satisfied with God's decree, whether they are given life or whether they are given death. And maybe this was the state of Abu Abdullah al-Hussain, that he could stand before his enemies after losing his friends and his family with an infant child in his hand and say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, ridhan bi qada'ihi wa tasliman li amri. To God we belong, to him we return, satisfied with his decree and at peace with his affair. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifina'ik. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعل الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.
Thank you very much, Sheikh. Questions from the ladies' side? Okay, we can go to the gents first.
Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome, salam.
Thank you for the lecture. I was just wondering, in terms of the descriptions that we have of heaven and hell in the Quran, how literally are we supposed to take them? Are they on a more metaphorical basis, or are they as described in the text?
I think there's a huge diversity of opinion on these matters. A huge diversity of opinion on these matters. You know, I think even within the history of Shia theology. So even those sort of theologians who would advocate the sort of textualist approach which I was promoting for once, yeah, in this context, they'd say, yeah, okay, there is a mizan, there is a sirat, there is barzakh, but we don't know what this means. Okay, we don't know the mode of these things. Yeah, so whether that mean, you know, whether that it doesn't have to necessarily be described as a metaphor in that sense. Yeah, many Muslim scholars have been uncomfortable in theology to reduce everything to a metaphor. Okay, and so there's a massive spectrum here. Massive spectrum. Those would say, no, these are metaphorical. Okay, how could it be literal? I mean, I gave the example of the gardens and the river is not appealing to us in this place. Or it may be appealing, but it's not striking as a way as it was striking to people who were raised in a place like Makkah. That's striking imagery, a river and a garden. For us, fire is striking. Okay, and maybe that's why we ignore the good news and just read the bad news. So it's quite plausible, okay, that these are metaphorical and not literal. The dominant approach amongst the theologians and within the framework that I've been introducing here, classical Imam theologians, is I think they would be hesitant to call them metaphorical. the time when they go for metaphor is if there's a rational reason against it. So if they thought that this is rationally impossible, they say, okay, now we need to interpret it away from its literal meaning. As long as there's rational possibility, they stick to literal meaning. Okay, so as long as barzakh, there's no evidence to say a notion like barzakh is rationally incoherent, they will maintain it as being literal. Yeah, this is the dominant approach of the classical Shia mutakallimun. Welcome.
Question from the lady side.
I'm sorry, I missed a lot of your talk, but
okay.
if you've covered this, I apologize. It was a question I actually wanted to ask yesterday as well, about hell and the severity of hell and the way it's described in the Quran. So you mentioned that there is potentially some good in punishment, and you talk about parents punishing their children and, you know, empathizing them to do good. But is there a reason that the Quran talks about it in such harsh and it's very, very harsh, actually. Well, I find it very harsh. Is there a reason for that? And
yeah, so I think this was, it maybe was before you came in, actually, Khadija, yeah? So no, that's okay. I think it's well worth emphasizing, because the negativity is emphasized so much. Yeah, is to me, there is an equal balance, okay? Or the basis is a balance, okay, between creating, of an aim to create fear and hope. All right, and we find this so much in the mystical and ethical literature, that this is a beautiful station of productivity. We are, even in political theory, we talk about a carrot and a stick. All right, and likewise, even in the mystical and ethical literature, okay, we see this optimal state for the vast majority of people. Because you look, when you're talking about a revelation, okay, usually it's first and foremost addressing generalities. There are always exceptions. Everybody's of different dispositions. Stick works more for some people, carrots work more for some people. But the basis of the Quranic discourse and the discourse of the prophets seems to be one of balance in terms of fear and hope. The prophet was Bashir, bringer of good news, and Nadhir, warner. Okay, so just as enticing, okay, were the descriptions of heaven and reward, okay, in the Quran, is the vividity, if that's a word, okay, of the torment of the hell. And if there's a tip on the balance in either way, it has to be towards God's mercy, because this unlimited God has explicitly said, "Kataba ala nafsihi rahma." So that rahma, as some of you were trying to draw on yesterday, okay, must be a basis for us interpreting the whole package. And this is why I would argue that actually even this punishment must be seen in light of his rahmah. That ultimately it's a merciful God. We might not understand how, coming back to the previous question, might not understand, okay, how does this exactly function? But if we have, as a theological basis, assume this is a complete God, this is a merciful God, then we must interpret things through that lens.
surely part of, if you think about kind of God's action and what God does in order to create kind of justice, we would feel that as human beings we should be able to emulate that to some extent. If, for example, we knew that someone had committed something that was bad or immoral, but I think from a human perspective we would find it very difficult to say yes, we would burn someone, or to describe it in such terrible terms.
Yeah, and I think this is why I wanted to point to that diversity of approaches. Okay, to me, like I said, this all boils down to a message of accountability. Okay, so to a certain extent, I think these they're very serious discussions. Yeah, I don't want to reduce them because that's been the whole point. We have to engage to move from doctrine to belief. All right, but for me, the whole discussion is about accountability. That's what we can't get away from, which means it's a positive impetus for here and now towards ahsan amal. Okay, yeah. Having said that, it's because of these sentiments that I introduces that notion of Ibn Sina. Okay, look, this is a way of us understanding the pleasure and pain, okay, in a very comprehensible way, okay, which again hopefully can inspire us to move here and now. And actually we can see this could actually be much more severe than any physical burning. Much more severe than any physical burning. Okay, and much more delightful than any garden of roses. You know, that we've experienced in our world, in our life today, you know, that these intellectual and spiritual achievements, these are the ones which really drive us. These are the ones which give us real satisfaction. Even if we say it's the result of a physical, I climbed Mount Snowdon. It wasn't a physical lift. It was I got over my own inabilities, and it was my own determination and development which made me feel good at the top. Okay, it's these spiritual or intellectual growth of achieving such things as integrity, dignity, honesty. These are the things which, you know, are really joysome. Okay, at least it seems through some human experience, okay, and in the discourse of the Quran and the Sunnah. So without this body, okay, those things become amplified. Okay, our appreciation of truth becomes amplified. Okay, likewise, this obsession with the physical hit, you know, the instant gratification, the sensual pleasures which we're obsessed with and bombarded with right now, even unconsciously, we're bombarded with it. We can't help it. Okay, we can't help it. You keep your eyes down or you're looking at your phone. The Quran says lower your gaze. Nowadays you lower your gaze and you see things you shouldn't be looking at. You know? Yeah, so this is very, very difficult and challenging. Very, very difficult and challenging. Yeah, so, but the point is that if we accustom our soul to these lowly pleasures, once the physical body has gone and we still have those desires, it would be a burning. This is one possible explanation. Yeah, I don't know. Here I'm with the theologians. I don't know. Okay, to me it's rationally plausible. I can accept it. Okay, and now I'm at the mercy of the texts here.
Thank you again very much. There is a tradition which might shed some light, and that is the Prophet asked one of his companions and said, how often do you remember death? And he said, I'm not sure of the range the companion gave. He said maybe once a week or once a month. And the Prophet said, أما والله إني لأذكر الموت عند كل خطوة وعند كل رمشة عين أو غمضة. Whenever I put a step forward, whenever my eye blinks, I remember. And this brings us to the most important thing, which is not the positivity, not remembering death, but remembering that the giver of this movement of the leg or of the eye lid is the ultimate, again, the ultimate being. And this will make the person pursue to become nearer to that being by instantaneously at any action, at any bat of an eyelid or movement of the leg, to be in the path of nearness. Yes. And that's why the traditions say if somebody allows a jolt of anger to pass without persecuting what he wanted with hawa, Allah will reward him by something much bigger. Or if he lowers his gaze from something which is forbidden, God will. So this continuous awareness of the higher being and being the giver of the ability that at every movement is happening will provide the person with the correct frame of mind to pursue the correct things and the rewards and the punishments, being not near Allah.
Hassan, thank you very much. I am on a similar note. The exceptional dua attributed to Imam Sajjad in Sahifa Sajjadiyah. I think it's the 40th dua, I can't remember exactly, but there's a dua which is reported he would recite on the mention of death, okay, and in remembrance of death. Okay, and I strongly recommend anybody to just look over, it's a short one, look over the translation. Exceptionally positive discourse about death. This is, oh Allah, keep its remembrance fixed upon me. You know? Yes, such that I don't forget it on the coming of one step over another, one breath over another, one movement over the other. Yeah, and make it so attached to me, okay, that it cuts off lengthy expectations and results in truthful action. Yeah? وَقْفِنَا طُولَ الْأَمَلِ وَقَصِّرْهُ عَنَّا بِصِدْقِ الْعَمَلِ. Okay, and it's so, so beautiful. It says, look, cut off for me lengthy expectations. It shows mention of death isn't about the hereafter. Mention of death is about now. Okay? Yeah, وَقْفِنَا طُولِ الْأَمَلِ. Suffice for me lengthy expectations. Okay? وَقَصِّرْهُ عَنَّا بِصِدْقِ الْعَمَلِ. And reduce them through, yeah, wholesome. Yeah, I know truthful, but to me, wholesome act. It's not even actions here. It's so present, this discourse, that he hasn't even used the term, make it a means to truthful or wholesome actions. Yeah, the Imam says, make it a means for truthful act, a wholesome act, that now let me be godly. So shukran jazeelan for the comments and for the opportunity for me to elaborate.
Assalamu alaikum. Just to add on, that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, says, Mutu, qabla an tamutu. So, literally kill yourself before the death grab your neck. So if you think like that, then everything will fall in the right way. And also in Surah Al-Zukhruf number 41, Allah says that when you sleep, you literally die. So if I give permission to your soul go back to your body, then you come back the next day. So it is so essential when you wake up, you just say, Subhanallah, I'm back to the life again. And then Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said again, do not think when you wake up you go to sleep, or when you sleep you wake up. If every single human being, Muslim or non-Muslim, because the Quran is a message for whole mankind, if you make yourself aware of that, then subhanallah, the action going to be lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions from the men's side?
So I have two questions. One is, where does the notion of shafaat come into this? Yeah. And the second one is that it seems to me it's not a clear-cut either or status. So we hear, for example, that in Jannah there are hierarchies.
Yeah.
So people who do better move up the hierarchy. And it seems to me that from Barzakh to Jahannam, the duration can vary. You don't have to be permanently there. If your misdeeds or miscreations are lesser, then you have a time after that you moved. So it seems to me only those who are really adamant on kufr, they will stay there. But those who have made indiscretions or who were not properly led to that will have exemptions after a period of time.
Yeah, I think there's some very, very rich questions there, actually, to be honest. I'll start with the last comment, if that's okay. Yeah, to me, the notion of eschatological punishment for kufr is obstinacy. Obstinacy is the basis for the kufr which is going to be punished in the hereafter. And I was discussing that with one of the scholars who's a part of your community this afternoon, that Mirza Qummi, who was a giant of Shia scholarship in the early 19th century, made this case. He was the leading scholar of Qum in his time. He made this case that the kufr, which is going to be punished in the afterlife, okay, is only that kufr which is the result of obstinacy and willful negligence in belief. Okay, that's the one which is finnar. Okay, that's the one which is punishable. So in that sense, I agree with that. On duration of barzakh and duration of the afterlife, these are very, very difficult questions, because these are outside. We operate in time and space here. Yeah, it's like an operating system. Yeah, the software operating system, whatever it is, OS 2 on the Mac, and Windows 7 or whatever it is. Yeah, so we live in the operating system of time and space. Yeah, and I find it very difficult to think outside of that. Now, descriptions of the Quran, of the hereafter, seem to be in a different operating system. So it's difficult. Scholars have tried to work these things out, and there's certainly levels and progress, without a doubt. Okay, it does seem, however, that there's talk of 2 qiyamah. Okay, and the second qiyamah, everybody is brought back after their barzakh. Okay, but these things, as I said, we are at the mercy of the text and the interpretation of the text. The first question was shafa'ah. Shafa'ah needs a separate lecture. Okay, yeah, but and how do we have a notion of shafa'ah which is consistent with a just God, okay, and a wise God? Okay, it is an issue which the classical Imami theologians have directly addressed. Now, very briefly, it seems to me that our sense of intercession is very, very problematic when it comes to shafa'ah. Mediation, I think, is a far more appropriate translation of this word and may help us with some of our intuitive concerns about the concept of shafa'ah. Okay, that there is no intercession between God and humankind. There is no intercession between God and humankind. Everything is by God. Everything is by God or through God's will or God's leave. There is no action except it is through God. There is no end except through it is through God. So what is this shafa'ah? These are designated means established by God, again, as an impetus for us. So the philosophy, to bring the thing short, the philosophy of shafa'ah is exactly the same as the philosophy of tawbah. Okay, the possibility of forgiveness and the impetus towards forgiveness, exactly the same concept. These are designated mediums through God to help the sinner not lose hope. Okay, because if I've lost hope with the extent of my sin, which only I and my God knows more actually than I'm aware of the sins that I've committed, but if I was really to count the stuff up, then there's no chance of my salvation. If I'm thinking very cold blank, so I say I might as well carry on. I might as well continue enjoying. I'm damned anyway. Okay? So the notion of tawbah, the notion of shafa'ah is an impetus, an opportunity to say, no, those things can be relieved from you if you reform yourself now. Yeah, so I don't know if that's briefly. Mediation, shafa'ah, tawbah, these are opportunities which are not unconditional. Okay, and they're intended as an impetus, again, impetus to move humankind now to fulfill their potential.
Questions from the ladies' side? Open.
Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome, salam.
You'll have to forgive me if I misunderstood you, so you can correct me if I have. You seem to be suggesting that our belief in the hereafter is based on the fact that we believe in the Prophet, and because we believe in him, we believe in the hereafter, but there is no rational justification for it. If that's the case, is it enough for us to...
No, not quite. So there was a... Can I clarify before you, and then let you continue?
Yes, fine.
Yeah? Okay, so the basic doctrine of there being an afterlife is argued for on a rational basis. Okay, from the notion of the existence of God. He's just, he's complete, he's wise. Okay, therefore there must be an afterlife. Yeah, because in this world, okay, we have responsibilities. He imposes upon us responsibilities, okay, and these are not always made up for in this world, so there must be a place to make up for them afterwards. That's one argument. Okay, there's unwarranted suffering in this world. Okay, there must be a place to make up for this. All right, he's a God, okay, who acts with purpose. There must be a purpose to all of this. All right, so very, very briefly, yeah, that's kind of encapsulating some of the core arguments that the Imami theologians would use to say there must be an afterlife. The details of the nature of that afterlife is based on texts unless it's considered rationally impossible.
So it's the details that you're saying we're unsure about, and those are possibilities, but not...
Yeah, okay, so again, I'm thank you for this question because it's giving me the chance to clarify. Yeah? Okay, it's not that we're unsure about their mode. We're unsure about what does this mean? Okay, like we had this discussion, what will the punishment actually be? What is the barzakh? How long is the barzakh? What is the sirat? It doesn't make any sense, a path. What is this sirat? Okay, what is this mizan? I don't know. Okay, yeah, what is the questioning in the grave? Okay, this doesn't make any rational, I mean, it doesn't quite add up. Yeah, it's like Arsenal winning the Champions League. Okay? Yeah, it doesn't quite add up. Okay, but as long as it's not rationally impossible, and we have a truthful revelation which tells us so, yeah, it can move from doctrine to belief. Yeah, so what the rational theologians try to do is they try to show or try to prove these are not impossible. If they can prove it's not impossible, we can take the literal meaning and believe in it.
So our belief in the barzakh, for example, is a possibility. And when we say possibility, we mean...
No. So what they were, again, I'm glad you're asking these questions. I'm really glad you're asking these questions. Okay, they say it's rationally possible. So there's no rational argument to say these things are impossible. Okay, therefore I can commit 100% to this belief based on the word of the Prophet. So I could say, no, I can have absolute conviction just because my Prophet said so, that there's a barzakh. I don't know the mode of the barzakh. I don't know what it's going to be like. Yeah, but I can absolutely accept it. Yeah, and I can have conviction in it.
Yeah, so that was my question on, is it justifiable to say that we believe something despite there being no rational basis for it?
Okay, good. So now this depends upon our conviction in the Prophet. It really depends upon our... Look, theology is a system, yeah, which is interconnected. Okay, and so it all starts with God. It all starts with God. And, you know, in the first lecture, really should have had a session on Nubuwah. Okay, because these are the three pivots, as we said. Yeah, the Usul al-Din for the Imami are 5. But the Asl al-Usul al-Din, even for the Imami, is 3. Okay, which is the nature of God, Nubuwah. And Nubuwah is a formulation of God's relationship with creation. Okay, it still stems from God for the Imami theologians. And then Ma'ad, this hereafter. Okay, so if we believe that God has sent truthful prophets, okay, because of God's nature that he must give us a means to assist us if he's capable of assisting us, and then we're convinced that that was the truthful prophet, then we could accept his word. Yeah, so it does depend on conviction in the Prophet. It's a package. Yeah, so excellent questions.
But it's not necessary for us to have independent conviction of those details.
It becomes difficult to, if it's just on the basis of the text. Yeah, so if you didn't believe in the Prophet, okay, how can you believe in what he said if it's got no rational basis to it? Again, we have to be very critical and analytical, yeah? So if you don't believe in the Prophet, veracity as a prophet, yeah, then these non-rational things, how can we accept? Or what's the basis for them? Remember, we need justification for the belief. Yeah, so of course the Prophet is pivotal. The Prophet is pivotal. And these non-rational issues, these are core of religious teachings, actually. Or if they're not core, these are actually exclusive remit of religious teachings. We say moral teachings, universal accessibility to it. You know, this is the stuff which only prophets could bring us, which is news of the ghaib. Yeah, actually, this becomes an exclusive remit of the Prophet, these things. You know, so it's central to a prophet's discourse, and very, very pivotal. Yeah, I hope that's helped. I know it probably hasn't answered all the questions, but a very, very good line of questioning. So thank you.
Thank you.
One very last question from the men's side.
Assalamu alaikum. Just drawing on one of the questions that was mentioned at the beginning, and also some of the discussions from the previous nights. If punishment is stressed so much in the Quran, the context of it, and you said the reason for punishment being stressed is to push this idea of accountability. The context of it is nearly always associated with kufr as well. Mm-hmm. So the idea that why is there so much accountability for kufr? Okay. Why is this such an important thing?
Such a beautiful question. If this is the last one, I'm very grateful for it. Yeah, not just because it's the last one, but because it's an excellent question. Yeah. Okay. First of all, I think there's equal emphasis on reward. Okay. I really believe there's equal emphasis on reward. Like I said, it's Bashir and Nadhir. Okay. So there is a lot of emphasis on punishment. But I think there's equal emphasis on reward. Okay, I haven't done a quantitative analysis of the verses. Yeah, so I might be wrong. Yeah, so somebody needs to do this work. Yeah, or I need to do this work. Yeah, but coming to your core question of why is kufr and punishment so linked? You know, because if it takes me back to some of the comments I made in the first lecture. It seems to me that God wants from us simplicity. Okay, he wants us to be absolutely clear. Yeah, he wants us to act conscientiously and consistently with truth as it's disclosed to us. You know, if truth is disclosed to us and we reject it, this is kufr. This is absolutely punishable. This is ungratefulness. Okay? Yeah, this is the obstinacy. Yeah, and this is the thing worthy of most punishment. You know, in terms of our individual journeys that we started with, saying that, look, there's an individual responsibility for belief, for doctrine to move to belief, for belief to move to action. It's this opportunity for us to be absolutely simple, sincere, and khalis. Okay, to achieve that level of ikhlas means we need to remove every level of kufr from within us. Yeah, so I think that's why kufr is so strongly condemned. It's not this kufr that we think it is. You know, somebody who just doesn't subscribe to the formal Islam. There's lots of kufr in here which I need to deal with. I'm not sure if that helps.
It does, but say for example, you don't have it, you don't have ikhlas in it because you're uncertain.
Yeah. No. Okay. So that's not kufr. If you're uncertain and you're acting sincerely out of your uncertainty, if you're embracing your uncertainty should impel you to study more, to reflect more, to experience more. Okay, if you're uncertain and you blindly follow, this is also kufr. This is, or we might call it nifaq. Okay? Yeah, if you're uncertain and you still follow. Okay, this goes back to that verse we started on. Okay, it was talking about kuffar. It says, بَلْ قَالُوا وَجَدْنَا آبَاءَنَا عَلَىٰ أُمَّةٍ وَإِنَّا عَلَىٰ آثَارِهِمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. It says, the Quran is blaming these people. Okay, you said that we found our fathers on a particular path. Okay, and we took their inheritance as guidance. So if we are in a state of doubt and we ignore that doubt, this is a form of kufr. Okay, and so here again it's the impetus for us to reflect further. Okay, to reflect further, to aspire more, we need this synchronous approach which Professor Iqbal was pointing to. It doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater. Okay, it's very, very important. Yeah, that through our practice, through our reflection, we seek, to achieve that simplicity and sincerity.
And if you go in circles of trying to...
Is that a sign? Is that a sign? Huh?
Essentially, if you can't fulfill those uncertainties, and you decide to follow based on nubuwah as your only other...
Nubuwah is a pivot. Nubuwah is a pivot. If we're convinced in nubuwah, we of course have to be convinced in it. No, we can't just rely on nubuwah if I'm not convinced in the Prophet. Okay, well, I have to have a basis for my conviction in the Prophet. It doesn't have to be rational as well. I know I've been giving this discourse of rational theology. But we said when it came to God, there's experience as a justification. There is a sense of authority which can be a valid justification. And there is rational. But we have to be convinced for it to count as belief. So this is difficult. It is unsettling. It is. Okay? Yeah, but I really believe this is the call. This is the call of the Quran. And this is actually one of the aims of prophecy. Imam Ali salamullahi alayhi, when he says what are the purposes of prophecy in Najl al-Balagh, I think it's the first khutbah actually. He says لِتُثِيرُ دَفَائِنَ الْعُقُولِ, to activate those internal, intellects, to activate the agent. We consciously, this would bring the difference. Otherwise, the aim is humanitarian ethic, but what's the difference? Okay? The qualitative difference of the religious person if this doctrine is actually shaping and moving them. And it seems to me that was the Dayyanun, those deeply committed people to God, which Husayn ibn Ali was calling for. Well, thank you for the question.
Thank you very much, Sheikh. Thank you for the extra time, and it's been very inspiring and thought-provoking. Please thank the Sheikh for all his efforts with your loudest salawat.